Hi, my name is Stuart Adams from Hypnotise, and in addition to being an entrepreneur and a marketing consultant, I'm also a hypnotist. Now, my specific training and background is as a clinical hypnotherapist, but these days I use my hypno skills to specialise in the psychology of marketing strategies. You see, hypnosis is all about changing what goes on up here, but specifically at the unconscious level, or the subconscious mind as it used to be called. Now, other than hypnotists, the people that actually understand the unconscious mind best are actually big marketing and advertising experts. Now, through the latter half of the 20th century, it was actually advertisers that really stumbled upon and explored the power of the unconscious mind, perhaps even more than therapists, because unfortunately the reality is there's probably more money in advertising than therapy. So those who are really good at understanding how this stuff works were more likely to go into the advertising area than what they were into therapy. By having the ability to influence people at the unconscious level, it has a kind of priming effect on the mind. So, for example, as a hypnotherapist, people might come to me because every time they are exposed to a particular trigger, their mind reacts in a way that stops them from being able to act in the way that they want. So, for example, that trigger might be public speaking, for example. When they get up in front of an audience, their mind reacts in a way that keeps them stuck and unable to act, feel and think in the way that they would have otherwise been able to. So therapeutically, by changing what goes on at the unconscious level by using things like hypnosis, for example, now when that same person goes back and experiences the exact same trigger, their mind is now primed to experience it differently, which enables them to take a different course of action as a result. Now, clever advertising and marketing strategies work in a very similar way. They're basically designed to prime people with the right feelings about particular brands to change the way that they feel and therefore act when deciding which brands to buy and how much to buy. So, where hypnotherapy is designed to prime people to change their everyday behaviours, effective marketing and advertising strategies are designed to prime people when it comes to their consumer behaviours. Now, as the top marketing guys know, this stuff is super powerful, but it's actually already around us in our everyday lives to the extent that most people are completely unaware of. In fact, it's because they're unaware of it that makes it unconscious. Now, to demonstrate, let me give you some classic examples of some brands that you're already familiar with. So which do you prefer the taste of more out of Coke and Pepsi? And if you don't have a particular preference, just think of someone you know who does, because when surveyed, most people will indicate that they do have a preference, even if it's just a slight preference. Now, in the food product development industry, this is called a triangle test, and I'm about to show you how to do it in a moment. Really simple. You can actually go out and do it on your own friends, and it's particularly fun to do it on the friends that really strongly insist that they have a preference over one over the other, especially if you want to make them look silly. So this is what you do. You get 3 identical glasses, you put Coke in one, Pepsi in the other 2, or vice versa, it doesn't really matter. Just make sure that the subject of your experiment doesn't know which is which, so mix them up a bit if you have to. Then just get the subject to have a mouthful from each glass, and all they have to do is see if they can pick which is which. Now, there's a 1 in 3 chance they're just going to guess it right, so make sure you repeat the experiment 3 times to eliminate the probability of just getting lucky. Now, if the difference between the 2 products is as obvious and pronounced as your friend thinks it is, then they should get it right 100% of the time without any struggle, nice and easy. But here's what's likely to happen. Most people will get it wrong most of the time. Now, some people will get it right some of the time. Some people might even get it right most of the time, but chances are, if they do get it right, they're going to have to really struggle and concentrate hard to be able to detect the difference. Compare that to when the same person can see the labels clearly and is consciously aware of which brand they're having, and it raises the question, why is it that they think that there's such a pronounced difference when they know which brand they're having, but when they don't know, either they can't tell at all or they really have to struggle to tell? Now, in reality, there's a slight difference between the 2, but given that most people perceive there being a big difference between the 2, you could say that most of that difference is actually all in people's head. And it's why that difference exists in people's head that I'm particularly interested in. Now, this is a really powerful effect. I mean, think about it. The drink hits the taste buds on the tongue, the nervous signals are sent to the brain, and then somewhere in the brain, the interpretation of the experience is altered depending on what's going on in their head, specifically how their unconscious mind has been primed to interpret the experience. Now, in the clinical hypnosis world, we know that it's not particularly difficult to hypnotise somebody into, say for example, seeing something that's not there, or even not seeing something that is there. A lot of research studies have found that it's pretty easy to actually hypnotise people into seeing different colours than the ones that are actually presented right in front of their own eyes. A classic stage hypnosis trick is to get an audience member to bite into an onion, but make them think they're actually eating an apple so they can't taste the difference. So basically, those of us in the hypnosis world know that this stuff is not particularly difficult or complicated, but what I think most people would be really surprised at is understanding how the power of the unconscious mind is used to influence people in the advertising and marketing context. Now, I don't know if you'll agree with me, but I reckon this is pretty powerful stuff. The thing to remember is you don't need to put somebody into a deep hypnotic trance to have this kind of effect either. You just need to know the right tricks to be able to affect the unconscious mind in the way that you want to. See, if you took somebody who lived their whole life on a desert island, you give them a bottle of Coke and a bottle of Pepsi so they can clearly see the labels, ask them to take a mouthful of both, they're probably going to say, I don't know, they pretty much taste the same, because they haven't had the same kind of priming exposure that the rest of us have just grown up with all around us. So the simplest way to explain priming is it's kind of like this. Let's say you take a person at point A, as they are, and then expose them to experience, let's call this point C. And now you go back in time, grab point A, and this time expose them to something else called point B that changes or influences the way that they feel. So now when they get to point C, they experience that differently to how they would have experienced it had there been no point B in between. So basically, point B could be anything that changes the way that they feel. It could be something like hypnosis. It could be something as simple as having a good or bad experience, or having a past memory they've attached to it. It could be something as simple as hearing positive or negative feedback about that thing. Or it could be something like advertising and marketing messages, such as the ones that we've been exposed to from brands like Coke and Pepsi, to prime us into thinking that there's a big difference in the two products, when in reality there's actually very little difference at all. Now, I have noticed that in recent times there are more and more people that are starting to really feel fascinated to learn more about this sort of hypnotic, unconscious, kind of subliminal mind trick stuff, especially how they can use it in their business. But up until now, most of the information about it has been quite complicated and limited to the big, powerful brands with enough money to hire the right experts who really understand how this stuff works. So here at Hypnotise Online Marketing, what we do is provide a similar kind of expertise to small and medium-sized businesses who really want to understand how to use their online presence as an effective priming agent. So if you think of it as like a production line in a factory, you've got a customer at point A, they go into the priming machine at point B, come out at point C ready to go. So what that means in your business context is that point B becomes your customer's exposure to your website or other online presence, so that basically by the time they decide to get in contact with you, they're already primed, they're already sold on your service, which means that now it doesn't take as much effort for you to sell them once you've got them on the phone or once you're dealing with them face to face. So look, if all this is something that you're feeling really interested to learn more about, then what we've done for you here at Hypnotise Online Marketing is we've created a short online training course for small business owners using really easy to understand terminology that shows you a very clear and simple 10-step formula to using your website and online content as an effective priming tool. So that way you can learn how to take advantage of these effects when it comes to your customers as well. So if you're feeling really curious to learn more, then follow me through the next 10 lessons. I'm going to show you exactly how this stuff works. But before we get started, there is one piece of advice I'd like to give you up front. Now, when you follow me through the 10 lessons, you're going to notice that at the end of each lesson, there's a couple of short little homework questions that I've set. Now, what I suggest you do is go grab yourself a pen and paper and spend at least 1 to 2 minutes just brainstorming some ideas based on those homework questions. And this is the reason why. I don't know if you remember back at school, but when you're trying to learn something and you're not particularly engaged in it, you have to kind of go over it and over it and over again before it totally sticks. Whereas when you're approaching new knowledge by exploring it with an existing question in mind, you kind of take it in at a deeper level. So it not only helps you remember it more effectively, but it helps you understand it in a way that's going to enable you to then go and apply that knowledge a lot more effectively. So with that in mind, let's get started. I'll see you on lesson 1.